The moment I stepped through that front door, I went completely still. The air in our house felt wrong, thick and close, the way it gets right before a storm rolls in off the flat fields. It was the middle of July, the kind of suffocating heat that makes the whole county smell like hot asphalt and cut grass, and I had just pulled off the biggest deal of my career. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, my work shirt was soaked through at the back, and I had a bottle of sparkling cider tucked under my arm because I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to find my husband, pull him close, and tell him that everything was finally turning around for us. Instead, I heard my father-in-law's voice coming from the kitchen, low, deliberate, the kind of voice you use when you're absolutely certain the other person has no choice but to agree with you. And what he was saying made me press my back against the hallway wall and stop breathing entirely. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding where we started and how good, how genuinely, quietly good, life felt before that Tuesday afternoon cracked it right down the middle. My name is Jessica Pruitt, though for the last 10 years I'd been going by Jessica Caldwell, because that's the name I took when I married Derek at 21 in a small ceremony at the VFW Hall in Millhaven, Tennessee. Millhaven is the kind of town where everybody knows what kind of car you drive, what you paid for your house, and approximately how much you argued with your spouse last Thursday. Population just under 4,000, one stoplight, 2 churches on the same block, which has always struck me as either very hopeful or very suspicious, depending on the day. I grew up in Millhaven. Derek grew up 1 county over in Clarkson, which might as well have been a different planet when we were teenagers, but felt perfectly ordinary once we were adults trying to keep a house warm through a Tennessee winter. We met at a county fair when I was 19. He was working the ride tickets. I was there with my cousin Patrice, and we spent 3 hours talking about nothing and everything by the funnel cake stand, while Patrice rode the tilt-a-whirl alone like a champ. By 21, we were married. By 23, I was a certified automotive technician. By 29, which is where we are now, or where I was on that July day, I had been running the service bay at Pruitt & Sons Auto Repair for 6 years. The name was my father's. He retired and handed me the keys to the shop, both literally and figuratively, when I was 23, and my 2 brothers had 0 interest in grease under their fingernails, so it was always going to be me. I loved that shop the way some people love a childhood home. The smell of motor oil and brake cleaner, the specific clang of a torque wrench on concrete, the satisfaction of diagnosing something nobody else could figure out. I had regulars who drove 45 minutes because they trusted my hands more than any dealership service center in the county. That trust took years to build, and I didn't take a single bit of it for granted. Derek, for his part, had spent the last 8 months between jobs. He'd been laid off from the distribution warehouse in February when the company restructured, and finding work in Millhaven when you don't have a trade is genuinely hard. He wasn't lazy, I want to be clear about that, because it matters. He was demoralized. There's a difference. He kept the house, took care of Rutger, and applied for jobs he probably knew he wasn't going to get, and I tried not to watch the checking account too closely. Rutger is our dachshund. He's 11 years old, which in dachshund terms means he moves like a very opinionated ottoman and sleeps approximately 20 hours a day. His back legs have gotten stiff over the past year, so he has a little ramp Derek built him to get up onto the couch. Derek spent an entire Sunday afternoon sanding that ramp so there wouldn't be any rough edges. That's the kind of man my husband is, when nobody's pulling at him from the wrong direction. The deal I closed that Tuesday was with the Hargrove County School District. They had a fleet of 43 buses and 2 aging maintenance contracts with shops in trash in Nashville that were costing them a fortune in travel fees and delayed turnaround. I had been working on that proposal for 4 months. 4 months of late nights, of spreadsheets I did not fully understand until my second attempt, of a presentation I delivered to the district's facilities coordinator named Brenda Okafor, who had the most terrifying poker face I have ever encountered in my professional life. Brenda called me at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in the second week of July and said in her perfectly measured way, Ms. Pruitt, we'd like to move forward with your proposal. 43 buses, a 3-year contract, the kind of money that would let me hire a second certified tech, maybe expand the bay, and stop doing the mental math every time Derek's truck needed new tires. I sat in my office, which is really just a repurposed storage closet with a window, and I put my head down on the desk, and I cried a little. The good kind of crying, the kind that comes from relief you didn't know you were holding. I texted Derek, "Coming home early. Big news. Get Rutger off the couch, we're celebrating." He texted back a single thumbs-up emoji, which was very Derek, and I grabbed the sparkling cider from the mini fridge in the break room, and I drove home with the windows down and the radio too loud, and I felt like the luckiest 29-year-old in Hargrove County. Our house is a white 2-story on Sycamore Creek Road, set back from the road with a gravel driveway and a side yard Derek keeps mowed in neat diagonal rows because he finds it calming. I pulled in at 4:22 p.m. and noticed something immediately. There was a second vehicle in the driveway, a silver Ford F-150, current model year, immaculate, no bumper stickers, no mud on the wheel wells. Garland Caldwell's truck, my father-in-law. I felt the first small tug of something uncomfortable, but I pushed it away. Garland stopped by sometimes. He lived about 20 minutes north, in a much nicer house in a much nicer part of the county, and he occasionally drove down to see Derek, especially since Derek had been out of work. I told myself it was probably fine. I told myself he'd probably leave by 5, and then Derek and I could have our celebration dinner in peace. I grabbed the cider. I got out of the car. The heat hit me like a wet blanket, that specific July heat that doesn't quit even at 4 in the afternoon, when the sun is still high enough to mean business. I could hear the central air units cycling on the side of the house, cicadas in the oak tree by the fence. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the cool hallway, and that's when I heard it, Garland's voice, coming from the kitchen. Not raised, never raised. That was the thing about Garland Caldwell that had always unsettled me in a way I could never quite put words to. He spoke the way a contract reads, precise, measured, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "She's not going to be happy about it," Derek was saying. His voice was low too, but different, the low of someone who's been worn down to something softer than they used to be. "She doesn't have to be happy about it," Garland said. "She has to agree to it. Those are two entirely different things." I stood absolutely still in the hallway. Rutger appeared from around the kitchen doorway, saw me, wagged his whole back end in greeting, and then apparently decided the effort wasn't worth it, and lay back down on the cool tile just inside the kitchen. He didn't bark. He never barked anymore. 11 years old and past all of that. I didn't move. I barely breathed. "Dad. Derek." A pause. The sound of a chair shifting. "I've been patient. I've watched you spin your wheels for 8 months in this town, in this situation. You have an opportunity here that most people don't get. I'm offering you a clean start, both of you." She loves that shop. She runs a repair garage in a town of 4,000 people. Garland's voice carried the particular warmth of someone who believes he is being extraordinarily generous. "The contract she just signed, yes, I know about it. Brenda Okafor is Helen's college roommate. These things get around. That makes the shop worth selling. Considerably more than it was worth last year. You take that money, you come up to Nashville, I have the position waiting for you, and you build something real." The cider bottle was cold in my hand. I was aware of every one of my fingers. "She's never going to agree to sell," Derek said. There was a brief silence, and then Garland said something that sent a slow, cold current straight through me, despite the July heat and the hum of the air conditioner, and everything warm and ordinary about that house. "She doesn't have to agree first," he said quietly. "She just has to be presented with the right circumstances." I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I stood in my own hallway, holding a bottle of sparkling cider I'd bought to celebrate the best day of my professional life, and I listened to my father-in-law calmly explain to my husband how to back me into a corner I couldn't get out of. And the worst part, the part that would take me weeks to fully reckon with, was that Derek didn't say no. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, maybe longer, while the air conditioner hummed and Rutger breathed slowly on the kitchen tile, and my father-in-law's words settled into me like something heavy dropped into still water. She just has to be presented with the right circumstances. I knew what that meant. Garland Caldwell had been in commercial real estate for 31 years. He didn't use vague language by accident. The right circumstances meant pressure, engineered pressure, the kind you don't see coming until the walls are already close. I made myself breathe, slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way my mother taught me when I was 7 and scared of thunderstorms. I looked down at the sparkling cider bottle in my hand. The condensation had soaked through the paper bag. I set it quietly on the hallway table, next to Derek's keys and a stack of mail we hadn't sorted yet. Then I walked into the kitchen. Garland was sitting at our table like he owned it, which, knowing him, was probably how he felt about most places he occupied. He had his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a cup of coffee in front of him that Derek must have made, because Derek always made coffee when his father visited, the same way you'd set out a tray for a guest you were slightly afraid of. He was 63 years old, silver-haired, built like a man who had played linebacker in college and never fully let it go. He wore a collared shirt even in July. He always wore a collared shirt. Derek was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, which was how he stood when he was uncomfortable. He looked up when I walked in, and something shifted in his face. Not guilt, exactly, but the specific expression of someone who knows they've been caught not doing something they should have done. "Jess," he said. "Hey," I said. I looked at Garland. "Garland?" "Jessica," he smiled, that comfortable, patient smile. "Congratulations are in order, from what I understand. Brenda Okafor doesn't hand out school district contracts to just anyone." "No," I said, "she doesn't." I pulled out a chair and sat down at my own kitchen table. My hands were completely steady, which surprised me. Something had happened in that hallway, some cold, clarifying thing, and I wasn't shaking anymore. I was paying attention. "How much did she tell you?" I asked him. "Brenda, how much did she share?" Garland tilted his head slightly. "Enough to know it's a significant contract. 3 years, 43 vehicles. That's a serious anchor client for a shop your size." "It is," I agreed. "It also means the shop is worth considerably more than it was last year." I watched his face. "Which I believe you already mentioned to Derek." The smile didn't move. That was the thing about Garland. The smile was architectural. It didn't respond to information. It just stayed there, like trim on a house that never changes no matter what's happening inside. Derek pushed off the counter. "Jess, I was going to." "I heard you," I said. I kept my eyes on Garland. "Both of you. I was in the hallway for a while." That landed. Derek went pale around the mouth. Garland, to his credit, didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes recalibrated. "Then you know I'm trying to help," he said. "I know what you said you were doing," I answered. "I also know what you said right before that. She just has to be presented with the right circumstances. That's a specific thing to say about your daughter-in-law, Garland. That's not help. That's a strategy." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator cycled on. Rutger shifted on the tile. Derek said, "Dad, I think you should—" "What circumstances?" I asked. My voice was calm. I was almost impressed by myself. "Walk me through it. I'd like to understand the plan." Garland set down his coffee cup. "Jessica, you're a smart woman. The shop is profitable, but it's small. It's always going to be small in a town this size. Derek has an opportunity in Nashville. I have a property management position open that would pay him nearly twice what that warehouse was paying, with benefits and a real trajectory. But that means relocating, and relocating means decisions about the shop." "Decisions you were going to engineer," I said, "without asking me." "I was going to present options." "You said she doesn't have to agree first." I leaned forward slightly. "That's not presenting options, Garland. That's deciding for me and then waiting for me to catch up." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You've built something real here. I respect that. But Derek is your husband. His career matters too. That one was designed to sting, and it did, because it had just enough truth in it to make the lie easier to swallow. I had been the breadwinner for 8 months. I had watched Derek lose himself in small increments, the way wood warps when it's been wet too long. I wasn't indifferent to that. I had never been indifferent to that. But I also knew the difference between my husband needing support and my husband being quietly recruited into a plan to back me into a corner. I looked at Derek. He was still standing by the counter, and he looked like a man who wanted very badly to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. "Did you know about this?" I asked him. The full version, not just the job offer, the part about presenting me with the right circumstances. He didn't answer immediately, which was itself an answer. "Derek." "He mentioned it a few weeks ago," Derek said finally. "I told him I didn't think it was a good idea." "And then you let him sit in our kitchen and say it out loud anyway." "I didn't think he was actually going to, but you didn't stop him." Another silence. Garland had gone very still in the particular way of men who are accustomed to controlling rooms and have momentarily lost that control. He was watching us now, not speaking, because he understood that the conversation had moved somewhere he couldn't steer. I stood up. I was done sitting. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. I was talking to both of them, but mostly I was talking to Garland, because Derek I would deal with separately, privately, in the way you deal with someone you love who has disappointed you but not yet destroyed you. The shop is not for sale. The contract with Hargrove County School District is mine, and it stays mine, and no amount of circumstance engineering changes that. If Derek wants to take a job in Nashville, that is a conversation he and I will have, together, without a third party who has already decided how it ends. Garland opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," I said. "Brenda Okafor and I are going to have a very good professional relationship for the next 3 years, minimum, and I would strongly prefer that relationship not be complicated by the fact that her college roommate's son-in-law is making real estate plays in Nashville that depend on me selling the business that just made her district's maintenance budget more manageable. Do you understand what I'm saying?" He understood. I could see it, the slight narrowing around his eyes, the reassessment. He was not a stupid man. Stupid men I could dismiss. Garland was smart, which meant he could recognize when leverage had shifted. "I'll see myself out," he said. He stood, straightened his collar, and picked up his keys from the table edge. He looked at Derek. "Think about it." Then he looked at me. "I do want what's best for both of you, Jessica. I know you don't believe that right now." "I believe you think you do," I said. "That's almost worse." He left. We heard the front door close, then the sound of the F-150 backing down the gravel driveway. Then silence, except for the air conditioner and the cicadas, and Rutger's slow breathing. Derek and I stood in our kitchen for a long moment without speaking. "I'm sorry," he said finally. He meant it. I could hear it, the real weight of it, not the reflexive version people use to end arguments. I should have told him no the first time. I should have told you. "Yes," I said, "you should have. I think I wanted there to be an answer I didn't have to figure out myself." That was the most honest thing he'd said in months, maybe longer, and it cracked something open in me, not in a breaking way, more like a window that had been painted shut for too long finally giving way. "I closed the biggest deal of my career today," I said quietly. "I bought sparkling cider. I wanted to come home and celebrate with you." He looked at the bag on the hallway table. Something moved across his face that I didn't have a word for. "I know," he said. We did celebrate eventually, not the way I'd imagined in the car with the windows down and the radio too loud, but we sat on the back porch after dark, when the heat had finally broken to something almost bearable, and we split the cider and we talked. Really talked, the way we hadn't in months. About the shop and about Nashville, and about what Derek actually wanted as opposed to what his father had decided he should want. About the fact that Millhaven was small, but it was ours. About the fact that 43 school buses was not nothing. Derek called a staffing agency the following week and found a regional logistics coordinator position out of a company based in Clarkson, 35 minutes away, real salary, benefits, No Garland Caldwell involved in the hiring process. He started in August. By September, he had stopped looking at job listings at midnight, and the diagonal mowing stripes were back in the side yard, and he built Rutger a second ramp for the bedroom doorway because the old one was showing wear. Garland called twice in the following month. I answered both times, which I think surprised him. The first call I kept to 5 minutes. The second one ran a little longer, and at the end of it he said, stiffly, that he was glad the school district contract had worked out. It was as close to an apology as I expected from him, and I decided it was enough to work with. Not forgiven exactly, but workable. Brenda Okafor and I signed the renewal paperwork 14 months ahead of schedule because the first year went so well. I hired a second certified tech named Dominique in October, 26 years old, sharp as a new blade, and not remotely interested in being anyone's project. She fit into the shop like she'd always been there. The last time I thought about that Tuesday, really thought about it, turned it over, was a Thursday evening in early November. Derek was making dinner. Rutger was asleep on his couch ramp, one back leg hanging off the edge. The kitchen smelled like garlic and the radiator heat that means winter is coming for real. I looked at all of it, the ordinary, irreplaceable, hard-won texture of the life we had built. And I thought about a man in a collared shirt telling my husband that I just had to be presented with the right circumstances. He was wrong about one thing. The circumstances didn't need to be engineered. They were already exactly right. I just had to be the one to say so out loud. And I did.